It is all but impossible to know how effective Russia's revamped spycraft methods will prove to be. In the intelligence world, you always know less than what you actually know. The West and its spy masters were hopeful of countering Russian espionage. Will Burns, who's the director of the CIA, wrote recently that Putin's growing authoritarianism has created an undercurrent of disaffection in Russia's security agencies. He also views this as a once-in-a-generation recruiting opportunity. Similar thoughts have been echoed by Sir Richard Moore, the head of the MI6, who has said, and again I quote, "There are many Russians today who are silently appalled. Our door is always open." But at the same time, the expulsions of Russian diplomats may have made counterintelligence much harder. Western agencies previously knew which diplomats were spies, and they could track who they met and even potentially recruit them. Either way, the operational effectiveness of these so-called co-opted illegals or clean skins is often less than imagined. They do not have the kind of capabilities that regular agents do. Sleepers work alone, they don't have much access to secret information, and clearly they don't have any official support. Since the Ukraine invasion, Western agencies have also stepped up cooperation, building a network of databases and connections to catch Russian operatives. There is much more international collaboration. It's become a priority of sorts now. With counterterrorism, the new mantra seems to be dare to share. Even so, Russia's intelligence machine will sometimes succeed spectacularly, like they did in 2020 with the SolarWinds cyber attack that hacked the Pentagon, or with the German air officer's leak case that happened recently. The days of the Cold War spy sagas are far from over.
The entire job application process will happen online. On this application form, they will have to swear allegiance to Indian Constitution, to India and its people. There are other formats also available. So with
Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. There's a new flashpoint in the India-China tussle. yesterday, India conducted a major missile test. Apparently, there was a Chinese ship close by. It was watching the launch from the high seas. So was China snooping on India's missile test? It is the same alibi as always. China claims the ship is a research vessel. But what was it doing near India's test site? We'll try to answer this question and join the dots for you. A dead whistleblower and a criminal probe are adding to plane manufacturer Boeing's troubles. We'll tell you how India's aviation sector could also be impacted. Ahead of the US election, President Joe Biden has unveiled a $7.3 trillion spending wish list. In Nepal, thousands have taken to the streets to demand a return of the monarchy. And finally, we'll tell you why a majority of the US teens want to get rid of their smartphones. That story and much more coming up. Let's start with the headlines. Indian troops begin withdrawing from the Maldives amid strained ties. Maldives' new pro-China president had asked the troops to leave. More than 80 Indian troops will withdraw from the archipelago by the 10th of May. In September, President Muizu came to power in the Maldives on an anti-India platform. India's National Security Advisor meets Israeli Prime Minister. The meeting in Jerusalem focused on the Gaza war. Ajit Doval and Benjamin Netanyahu also spoke about efforts to release the hostages and the need for humanitarian aid. Israel's Gaza offensive has killed more than 30,000 Palestinians. Haiti's Prime Minister Ariel Henry resigns. It comes as regional leaders held an emergency meeting in Jamaica. In recent weeks, Haiti has been rocked by widespread violence. Armed gangs who now control the capital wanted the unelected Prime Minister to step down. Romania detains Andrew Tate on a UK arrest warrant. The controversial influencer was arrested over sex offence charges. A Bucharest court will now decide on Tate's extradition to the UK. He's under investigation in Romania as well on charges of rape and human trafficking. An Airbnb bans security cameras inside guest homes. The home rental platform says it wants to prioritize privacy. Earlier, Airbnb allowed indoor security cameras in the common areas, but there have been several complaints about hidden cameras in Airbnb lodgings. We begin with the story of Agni-5. India's latest missile. It was tested yesterday and it was a big win for India. But now it turns out that China may have been snooping on India when the test was on. The mission was called Divyastra, meaning a divine weapon. Guess who was around to witness it? An uninvited guest, a Chinese ship that Beijing calls a research vessel. This ship is called Xiangyang Hong 1. Reports say it was in the Bay of Bengal region. It entered these waters just before India's missile test. The ship was spotted less than 260 nautical miles off the coast of Visakhapatnam. India conducted its tests here on the APJ Abdul Kalam Island off the Odisha coast. As you can clearly see, the Chinese ship was in the vicinity of India's test site. But what was it doing there? This so-called research vessel did not reveal where it was going or what it was up to. As far as we know, the Chinese did not announce that they'll be sending the ship, but Beijing's intentions are quite obvious. This ship was probably there to monitor the test, collect whatever data it could, because this launch was a major milestone for India, a significant breakthrough. India tested a new weapons technology. It's called MIRV. Multiple Independently Targetable Re-Entry Vehicle, MIRV. Now, this is basically a missile equipped with multiple warheads. It can hit a range of targets in a single strike, and there is a good reason for China to be watching this closely to seek more information about India's launch, because this missile will serve as nuclear deterrence against countries like China and Pakistan. China already has this weapons technology, so does Russia, the United States, France and the United Kingdom. Yesterday, India joined this elite club. And like any military expert will tell you, it pays to know the strengths and weaknesses of your rivals. So China may label it as research, but what it's doing is classic espionage. And it's being quite invasive and brazen about it. We keep telling you about these Chinese research ships. They're becoming quite a nuisance. They keep showing up in India's neighborhood. In October last year, a Chinese ship docked in Colombo, the capital of Sri Lanka. Last month, China sent a ship to the Maldives, their new BFF in the region. And now it's turned up in the Bay of Bengal. The equipment on these research ships is designed for dual use, meaning it has both civilian and military applications. And that is why this is a cause of concern. And this is not happening, like I said, for the first time. There was another incident in 2022. It happened in November. India was planning a missile test. It had put out a NOTAM. NOTAM is Notice to Air Missiles. It is basically like a warning telling plane operators and pilots and air traffic operators to avoid a certain area in the skies. These notices are used to enforce a no-fly zone before a missile test so that pilots can keep their planes away from the test site. But guess who could not stay away? The Chinese and their research ships. Reports say just before India's test, the Chinese dispatched a research ship. It was seen in the Indian Ocean. And how did India react? It withdrew the original notice and issued a fresh one, this time to institute a no-fly zone over the Bay of Bengal. Ultimately, the test went ahead. So India is keeping an eye on the Chinese, but the challenges will keep coming. Last week, the Indian Prime Minister visited Arunachal Pradesh. The trip has caused outrage in Beijing.
The area of Zangnan is Chinese territory. The Chinese government has never recognized the so-called Arunachal Pradesh, illegally set up by India, and firmly opposes it. India's moves will only complicate the boundary question and disrupt the situation in the border areas between the two countries. China strongly deplores and firmly opposes the Indian leader's visit to the east section of the China-India boundary. We have made solemn representations to India.
China's protest has no basis. Arunachal Pradesh is an integral part of India, but the Chinese keep claiming the Indian state as theirs, even when these claims have no international backing. New Delhi has lodged a counter-protest. India's statement has rejected China's claim. So the back and forth continues, both on the land border and the high seas. There's more trouble for Boeing. A criminal investigation, a failed audit, a dead whistleblower, and multiple mid-air mishaps. It's basically Murphy's Law in action. Everything that can go wrong is going wrong. Let's start with the latest. A Boeing whistleblower has been found dead in the US. His name is John Barnett. Now, Barnett worked at Boeing for 32 years. He flagged many safety issues on their planes, specifically in the oxygen system. He said the onboard masks had a 25% failure rate. So 1 out of 4 masks may not work. He also accused Boeing of using substandard parts. Of course, the company denied this, but later probes upheld Barnett's claims. So how did he die? Barnett was in South Carolina for the Boeing case. He was to appear for questioning on Saturday, but he did not turn up. When officials went looking, they found him dead inside his truck. It was parked at his hotel's car park. And cause of death? Apparently self-inflicted wounds. Now, this whole incident is very fishy. Barnett was on a crusade to expose Boeing. Why would he take his life? Why would he just give up on his mission? Only a thorough investigation can give us the answers. But for Boeing, the headline is bad enough. Plus, it comes at the worst possible time for them. You may remember the mid-air incident from January. A Boeing plane's door panel just flew off while the plane was mid-air. After that, the US FAA decided to investigate Boeing's production process. A quick side note, the FAA is the Federal Aviation Authority. It is America's aviation watchdog. As part of their probe, they conducted 89 tests. Guess how many Boeing failed? 33 out of 89. That's a 37% failure rate. Not bad for a homemade toy plane, but for a real one, 37% is borderline metal coffin. Boeing Supply did equally bad. That's Spirit Aerosystems. They make the fuselage for Boeing's MAX planes, and Spirit failed 7 out of 13 audits. 7 out of 13, they failed. One of them involved the door panel, the exact part that flew off mid-air in January. So what is Boeing doing about all of this? The company says it is implementing immediate changes. It is making a plan to strengthen its safety and quality. And what is the US government doing? After all, they cleared these planes to fly. Reports say the US Justice Department has opened a criminal investigation. Again, the focus is on the January incident. All of this compounds Boeing's problems. It's already a company in crisis. Just look at the share prices. In March 2019, Boeing shares were worth $378. And now, just $192. That's a 50% drop in 5 years. If you think this problem is only Boeing's, you're wrong. The problem affects all of us because aviation is a duopoly, meaning 2 companies dominate this market, America's Boeing and Europe's Airbus. Together, they make up 99% of all large planes, plus 90% of the overall industry, 2 companies. This closed nature extends to supplies as well. For example, very few companies make engines for planes, like Pratt & Whitney and General Electricals. So what happens if one of them fails? Or if one of their planes is temporarily grounded? Or if one of the engines runs into a problem? The whole industry will be disrupted. It can happen in 2 ways. One is delivery issues. Let's look at Indian carriers. A lot of them have placed orders from Boeing. Akasa Air is buying 150 planes, Air India is buying 220 planes, and Indigo is looking to buy 25 planes. These aircraft will drive their domestic and international expansion. But what if safety issues delay that? It could cost a lot of money. The second problem is plane renting costs. You see, airlines do not buy planes all the time. Sometimes they lease them. But that cost is rising fast. Take the Airbus A320 plane. It's a workhorse of the aviation world. A 10-year lease on that plane costs $117,000 per month. It is 14% higher than last year. Same with Boeing 737-800. Another workhorse of the aviation world. Its lease rate is 13% up compared to last year. The question is why? A, because demand is rising, more people are flying than ever before, and B, because of supply shortage. Let's go back to that January mid-air incident. The plane involved in that incident was a Boeing 737 MAX 9. Now that model is still grounded in many countries. So what do carriers do when those planes are grounded? They have to look elsewhere for planes. And that is the danger of a duopoly. It's just one step away from a monopoly, a situation where the supplier can dictate price and supply. If that happens, it's bad news for customers. Prices of planes will rise, leasing costs will rise, and carriers will dump that burden on us. So what is the solution? At this point, there isn't one, honestly. You see, making planes requires a lot of capital. You can't just randomly enter the market. Plus, Boeing and Airbus know all the right people. They're in bed with regulators across the world. So this duopoly is not some organic market development. It's a carefully crafted system, one that keeps aviation dependent on Western producers. It's budget season all over the world, and on Monday, Joe Biden unveiled his, a $7.3 trillion spending wish list. Now, normally a budget is a policy document, but this is election year in the US, so Joe Biden's budget is not just about policy. It's also a campaign pitch, a sneak peek into what a second Biden term could look like. We'll bring you the top 3 highlights. Number 1, more tax on the rich. Biden wants to raise corporate tax from 21 to 28%. He's also targeting the top 0.1%. That's Americans worth over $100 million. Biden wants them to pay 25% in taxes. Now, this has been a big liberal demand, to increase taxes on America's ultra-rich. And Joe Biden is now promising to do that. Highlight number 2, more spending on Social Security, again a liberal demand. Biden wants subsidies on childcare and college. He also wants to spend $258 billion on building houses. Another proposal is paid family leave. It could cover 12 weeks for a variety of reasons, like to look after family members or to recover from illness. And finally, highlight number 3, controlling defense spending. Joe Biden plans to increase military spending by just 1%. He wants to buy fewer F-35 jets and submarines. Now, this budget is all about 2 things. 1 is catering to his Democratic voter base, and 2, differentiating himself from Donald Trump.
But guess what? But I'm a capitalist, man. Make all the money you want. Just begin to pay your fair share of taxes. The last administration enacted a $2 trillion tax cut. $2 trillion tax cut that benefits the very wealthy in the top 1%. The biggest corporations, and exploded the federal deficit. Last administration added more to the national debt than any presidential term in American history.
When will this budget be passed? Well, that's the thing. Chances are it won't be passed. You see, the US House is controlled by the Republicans. They oppose many of Biden's proposals, so do not expect this budget to be passed. Even last year it wasn't. Instead, the US government is functioning on interim funding, sort of like a stopgap measure. But I must say one thing here. Biden's budget is very myopic in the current context. It focuses more on the election. Why else would you curb defense spending now, in the middle of 2 wars, in the middle of a standoff with China? Because geopolitics can wait, elections cannot. That's why he's doing what he's doing, at least proposing it. The same applies to Biden's foreign policy. His support for Israel is changing slightly. Reports say Biden has issued a warning to Benjamin Netanyahu: if you invade Rafah, military aid will stop. And that is a major warning. The US gives some $3 billion to Israel every year. If that aid stops, it could mean trouble. But why has Biden issued this warning now? Because his support for Israel is hurting him. Muslim Americans are threatening to abandon him in the next election. They want him to stop the war in Gaza. Just one problem, though. Biden wants to appease both sides. There are 3.5 million Muslims in the United States. And how many Jews? Around 8 million. So Joe Biden does not want to abandon either camp. The result is a confused policy. On the one hand, Biden is blocking UN Security Council resolutions against Israel. On the other, he's pushing for a ceasefire himself. Do you see the confusion here? Biden wants to appease both sides, Muslims and Jews, and in the process, he's getting nothing done. It tells you how high the stakes are. Joe Biden faces a tough path to re-election. Just look at the poll numbers. Trump has a 1.4% lead over Biden. Most polls put the former president ahead now. So Biden is pulling out all the stops. His State of the Union address was a campaign speech. His new budget is a campaign promise. And his policy on Israel is neither here nor there. China is having money problems too. Its provinces and local governments are out of cash. They need some debt relief and they need it fast. Now, this story came out a few days ago. Officials from indebted regions were in Beijing. They were from two provinces, Liaoning and Hebei, along with representatives from the city of Tianjin. They participated in a series of crisis meetings. Leading bankers from state-owned banks were also present. In these meetings, local government officials made some requests to the bankers. They wanted their debt payments renegotiated. They wanted their loans to be restructured and refinanced. Basically, they were looking for ways to avoid a potential default. And this risk of default is real. China's local governments face a mountain of debt. Do you know how much money they owe? A whopping $13 trillion. This is according to Goldman Sachs. The IMF has a different estimate, the International Monetary Fund. They say Chinese local governments owe anywhere between $7 and $11 trillion. This year alone, loans worth $400 billion need to be settled. So the clock is ticking, and it has been like that for a while. But Beijing has been reluctant to deal with this problem until it became too big to ignore. So last year, Beijing dispatched a team of experts. They traveled to the provinces, 10 provinces and cities, the weakest of the lot financially. And these experts went over their books and reported their findings to Beijing. Then last week, the Chinese premier spoke. He promised to take action.
We will develop government debt management mechanisms that meet the needs of high-quality development. We will enhance our capacity for preventing and controlling financial risks.
China's finance minister agrees with the premier. He is confident that this debt bubble can be contained. But what is China's plan? How will they pay off the trillions of dollars of debt? Their economy is valued at over $18 trillion. The Chinese economy, more than $18 trillion. Local governments owe at least $7 trillion, and that's the most conservative estimate. The worst case scenario is some $13 trillion in debt. That's over 70% of China's GDP. Clearly, Beijing does not have this kind of money lying around. So how will it repay the debt? In January, Beijing offered some solutions to local governments. A program was launched to replace old debt with new low-interest government bonds. Beijing also told banks to reduce interest rates and to extend the maturity date on some loans. So Beijing is trying to buy time, basically. It is dealing with the debt by cleaning up the books and by delaying the repayments. But it was not proving to be enough, which is why local government officials sought direct intervention from the bankers in Beijing. Thankfully, there has been no default so far, and Beijing is taking steps to prevent one. But these efforts are adding to the stress on the Chinese economy. Take the case of Yunnan. It's a province in China. In 2022, this province owed 1.2 trillion yuan. That's over $130 billion. That was their debt. Now, this debt has led to other problems. Earlier, Yunnan was funding more than 1,000 projects, including new highways and theme parks. Now, all these projects stand suspended. And this is a problem for the Chinese economy. Its growth is tied to infrastructure investment. It is the main vehicle that drove China's rise, infra investment. It is also what created this massive pile of debt. When the economy was booming, China encouraged local governments to take loans and build more infrastructure even when they did not need it. This debt fueled a rapid expansion of China's economy, but today it has become the country's biggest liability. In India, there's more trouble for Byju's. The edtech giant has vacated its offices across the country. Only one office is functional, and that's the headquarters in Bengaluru. 14,000 employees have been asked to work from home. Byju says it's part of a restructuring plan, but this is more likely about cost cutting. Byju's is out of money. 75% of the employees have not received a part of their salary from last month, February. And funds are stuck in a very public dispute with investors. It looks like the company is pulling all stops. But will that be enough for it to survive? Here's a report.
In 2023, Byju's had around 100 offices in India. As of today, it has only one, its headquarters in Bengaluru. The edtech giant has vacated all its office spaces. Employees have been asked to work from home, 14,000 of them. It's not a sudden process. Reports suggest it's been happening for some time now. It's part of the company's restructuring plan. These rental spaces were on contract. Once the leases ran out, Byju's did not renew it. The aim was to cut costs. However, the tuition centers are still running. Byju's has 300 of them. They are in-person coaching centers. Those will still be running. The move comes as Byju's struggles with cash flow. In the month of February, salaries were delayed. They were later dispersed, but 75% of the employees have only received a part of it. Byju's is reportedly struggling to repay a $1.2 billion loan. The company was depending on its $200 million rights issue. This was to raise capital and meet costs. But that remains stuck right now because of a tussle with investors. Byju Ravindran says a group of investors have blocked the funds. This has rendered it unavailable for business purposes. The case will be heard in April. But that's not the only trouble for the founder. Last month, Byju's major stakeholders voted to remove Byju Ravindran. They wanted to strip him of his CEO tag. But Byju Ravindran moved the courts. They ruled in his favor. He's still the CEO, but the question is, for how long? How long can Byju's survive? Multiple petitions have already been filed against the company. This is with the company law tribunal. They want one thing, to begin insolvency proceedings. Basically declare that the edtech giant is bankrupt. Even law enforcement is involved now. The ED, or the Enforcement Directorate, has issued a lookout notice against the founder. Byju's was once the poster child of Indian startups. In 2022, it was valued at $22 billion. They once signed Lionel Messi as their brand ambassador. But troubles soon emerged. A hiring spree during the pandemic, bad financial health, a toxic work culture, and shady governance practices raised questions. Since then, the company has lost 95% of its valuation. Byju's is worth around $1 billion right now. Its offices are being vacated. There have been multiple layoffs. Salaries are delayed. Investors want Byju Ravindran out. Shareholders have lost confidence. And Byju's is selling its business units to raise money. It's quite a dramatic fall for Byju's and a cautionary tale. A lesson on how organizations shouldn't be run.
When people protest, you tend to feel for them, even feel obliged to support them. But in Nepal's case, we don't. Thousands of Nepalese have hit the streets of Kathmandu. They're marching and shouting slogans. And what do they want? To bring back the monarchy. Let me repeat that. Nepalese protesters want to abolish their republic. They want the former king to rule Nepal.
Our country will retain its value and identity only if it is turned back to a monarchy and the king is reinstated back to the throne.
For the continuation of Nepal and Nepali people, we need a monarchy. Without a king, we have no identity as Nepalese, and all of us might as well just declare ourselves as refugees.
Now, we've seen the opposite many times. People protesting to remove the king is quite common. Even Nepal had a similar movement. Until 2005, it was a constitutional monarchy. But the last king, Gyanendra, had other plans. He dismissed the parliament, he jailed politicians and journalists, he declared an emergency and captured absolute power. That's when public protests broke out in Nepal. Thousands of people hit the streets demanding the king's abdication. And in 2006, he relented. The king transferred power to the parliament. 2 years later, the monarchy was abolished. Today, King Gyanendra lives like a commoner. He rarely makes public appearances or comments. So why do protesters want him back? because they feel democracy has not delivered. And you can't really blame them. Nepal's democratic journey began in 2008. Since then, they've had 13 governments. That's 13 governments in 16 years. Parties keep splitting, coalition partners keep changing, and so do prime ministers. Just look at what happened earlier this month. Nepal's prime minister changed his coalition partner. He dumped the Nepali Congress. He then allied with a faction of the Communist Party, the CPN Unified Marxist-Leninist. That's the faction of former Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli. Now, fun fact, this new coalition is not exactly new. It's the same equation of 2022. In November that year, general elections were held. Pushp Kamal Dahal, or Prachand as he's better known, wanted to be Prime Minister, but his ally, the Nepali Congress, did not agree. So what did he do? He joined hands with Oli's faction. A few months later, he changed his mind. He dumped Oli's faction and went with the Nepali Congress. This was in March 2023. 1 year later, he's changed again, dumped Nepali Congress and joined hands with Oli's faction. I know it is confusing even to hear all of this. So imagine living through it. This is the third coalition since 2022. It's the textbook definition of instability, and instability leads to mismanagement. Let me show you some numbers. Nepal's GDP grew by just 1.9% in the last financial year. Inflation was around 7.7% and unemployment around 11%. It's actually much higher in the 15 to 29 age group. That's nearly 20% unemployment. In fact, most Nepalese youth are leaving their country. They want to live and work abroad. Consider the first 7 months of the last financial year, around 400,000 Nepalese left the country. That's almost 1,900 people every day leaving. It's a huge number for a country of 30 million people. So the resentment is justified. But do remember one thing. It's not democracy or republicanism that has failed. It's the politicians of Nepal. That distinction is very important. Restoring the monarchy will not help Nepal. The idea that only a king can preserve national identity is wrong. After all, most countries do not have a king. Does that mean they do not have a national identity? Of course not. The problem here is that there are royalists within the democratic setup, like the Rashtriya Prajatantra Party. It was founded in the 1990s by the king's allies. Today it has 14 seats in Nepal's parliament, which is 5% of the total. Now, this party is leading the movement to restore the monarchy. I'm sure they have their own vested interest in doing so, but it's important that Nepal's people reject it. If your democracy does not work, do not replace it. Just replace the people running it. Vantage continues after a short break.
They will have to specify where they came from, the country of origin, the religion that they follow. As far as documentation is required, the Schedule IA that has been mentioned, Schedule 1A, which has been mentioned as part of the Gazette notification, says that 2 sets of documents are required. One, to prove your nationality, and second, to prove that you came to India before the cutoff date of December 2014. So what can these documents be? As far as the documentation to prove your nationality is concerned, passport from your original country, some kind of a birth certificate from your original country, or any government document from your country of origin, which is Bangladesh, Afghanistan or Pakistan, is acceptable. Now, one might ask that if these are persecuted minorities, if they have fled from their country, how is it that they will have these documents? So, one has to understand that this is a situation where we are talking of people who have been in India for the last 10 years, at least, because 2014, like I said, is the cutoff date. When they came to India, most of them came on long-term visa. For example, I spoke to some people who are in Rajasthan, who fled from Pakistan, but they came to India on the pilgrimage visa. Similar instances are found in Majnu Ka Tila area of Delhi as well. So these are people who took a 7-day visa or a 15-day visa saying that we want to do Kumbh Mela or we want to visit places of pilgrimage. So when they came and they got that visa, they had their passport and they had their visa stamped as well. There is no renewal for passport that these people required, because within 1 month of coming to India, as per existing norms, they had to go to the local FRRO the Foreigners Registration Office and say that I don't want to go back to my country because I fear persecution. Now, under the new rules, even that FRRO slip whereby you have communicated and FRRO has acknowledged your communication, even that is being accepted by Government of India. And because based on that FRRO slip, you were given a long-term visa. So the process of documentation is already there. Some people, because they've been in India for so long, have gotten their children admitted into schools. In the school admission form, their country of origin is mentioned as Pakistan, Bangladesh or Afghanistan. They've got their Aadhaar cards based on their long-term visa. Those Aadhaar cards have been linked to bank account, bank documents. All of these are acceptable documents now. So for this group which came to India before 2014, life will be much simpler, it will be much easier. But they hope and they feel that there are many in these colonies, refugee camps of Jaisalmer, refugee camps of Majnu Katila. The exodus from these countries continue. From these three countries, people have come in 2016, 20, 22, and people I spoke to, those who are benefiting from the new CAA rules, say that we will definitely pray that this day comes in the lives of our other brethren as well. But of course, Indian government will have to take a call. For now, people who came before 2014 December can avail of Indian citizenship under the new Citizenship Amendment Act rules. Citizenship Amendment Act rules have finally been framed and notified. This means that people from Pakistan, Afghanistan and Bangladesh who came to India before December 2014 and who want to now be called Indian citizens, they now know how to go about the process. There is a portal that is being notified by the Ministry of Home Affairs, which means the entire job application process will happen online. On this application form, they will have to swear allegiance to Indian Constitution, to India and its people. There are other formats also available. So with the application, they will have to specify where they came from, the country of origin, the religion that they follow. As far as documentation is required, the Schedule IA that has been mentioned, Schedule 1A, which has been mentioned as part of the Gazette notification, says that two sets of documents are required. One, to prove your nationality, and second, to prove that you came to
Now let's look at South Korea, the land of K-pop, K-dramas and now a medical crisis. South Korea's trainee doctors are on strike. There are about 12,000 who are protesting. The strike has now entered its fourth week and there's no end in sight. In fact, it may get worse. Now, medical college professors are threatening to quit. They say they will step down if their striking trainees are punished. It puts the government in a tough spot. Seoul has begun suspending medical licenses. So if it goes through with this punishment, the crisis could escalate. The government has already brought in the military. They've asked military physicians to cover for the striking doctors. But how sustainable is this solution? Here's our report.
South Korea is facing a medical crisis. 93% of its medical trainees are on strike. Almost 12,000 trainee doctors haven't been showing up for work. The doctors are protesting against a government initiative. Seoul wants to increase the intake of medical students. The South Korean government believes that there will be a doctor shortage soon because the country is rapidly aging. Therefore, more healthcare professionals will be required in the years to come. So the government wants to increase the number of doctors in the country by increasing the student intake. They want 2,000 more students every year starting from 2025. But the current trainee doctors believe that this is unfair. They think more students will lower the quality of medical education. They also think the additional doctors will lead to a reduction in pay because of more competition in the market. South Korea's trainee doctors want the government to raise their wages first. And that is what has led to the present standoff. The doctors' strike has entered its fourth week, and it's starting to take a toll on the country's healthcare system. Surgeries have been cancelled, wait times have been increased, and treatments have been delayed. To provide support to its hospitals, South Korea's government has now turned to the military. Yesterday, it deployed 20 military surgeons and 138 public health doctors. They've been sent to 20 hospitals across the country for an initial period of 4 weeks. More military personnel may be deployed soon. Military hospitals have also been opened up to the general public, and nurses have been given permission to perform some medical procedures reserved for doctors. But these are stopgap measures at best, because South Korea is short by 12,000 medical professionals at the moment. And more may be on their way out.
어제 서울 의대 교수협의회
There was a media report on Seoul National University Medical Professors Emergency Committee resolution to submit resignations en masse. I deeply regret and want to express deep concern over the decision as it poses serious threats on patients' lives and health. The professors must work with the government to urge trainee doctors return to hospitals.
진료를 거부한 전공의들이 환자 곁으로 돌아오도록 지혜를 모아야 할 것입니다.
Medical professors are standing by their pupils. They say that if the trainee doctors are punished, they will resign. Seoul has already threatened the striking doctors with punitive action. The government said it would revoke their medical licenses. The process has begun. About 5,000 doctors have received suspension notices. More notices are expected to follow. This is a pressure tactic. The government also promised leniency to doctors who return to work. But it seems the plan backfired. Today, professors from 33 of South Korea's 40 medical colleges passed a resolution. They have threatened collective action, which has left the government scrambling again. No trainee doctors is bad enough. No medical professors would be a disaster. It's now a game of who blinks first, the government or the doctors. And all this while lives hang in the balance. Ordinary South Koreans are suffering. So for their sake, this standoff needs to end, and cooler heads need to prevail.
Our next story is from Nigeria. Last week, we told you about a kidnapping. Almost 300 students were taken from their school during morning assembly. This was last Thursday. The children still haven't been found, and no group has taken responsibility yet. But the kidnappers are expected to demand a large ransom for their release. Now, if this was happening on your watch, what would you do? Send out the army? Go meet the families of the victims? Set up base in the affected town until the children are found? All good options. But Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has different ideas. He did fly out yesterday, but he landed about 150 kilometers south of the affected village. He went to a different state. Why? To inaugurate an airport that has been renamed after him. So amid a spree of kidnappings, Nigeria's president chooses to inaugurate the Bola Tinubu airport. A crisis is unfolding under his nose, but Tinubu is busy cutting ribbons, which begs the question, how tone deaf can you be? How can you ignore the plight of your citizens? These are some families from Kuriga, the village where the children were kidnapped.
We plead with the government to help us. We don't have any security in this community, no police outpost, no military presence, and no local vigilante. We are responsible for our own security, so anytime they want, they will invade the community and do whatever they feel like doing.
We don't know what to do, but we believe in God. We don't have security, no soldiers, no police to protect the school.
This problem we are facing, we are crying, looking for help from the government and God. But it is the gunmen that will decide to bring the children back.
They say they haven't received any help from the government. They're at the mercy of the bandits, and they're anxiously waiting to get their children back. In this situation, inaugurating an airport seems absurd. Now, the Nigerian government will say that they are on top of things. They have reportedly deployed the army. They're apparently working with the Air Force and local vigilante groups as well. But so far, there have been no updates on the whereabouts of the children. Meanwhile, there have been more kidnappings. On Saturday, 15 more school children were taken, this time in the country's far north. In another case, kidnappers have come out with their ransom demand. This is for 16 people who were kidnapped on the 28th of February. The kidnappers allegedly want 14 trillion naira. That's about 25 billion US dollars. Of course, that's a ridiculous amount, but it shows the impunity of the kidnappers. They've been getting bolder over the last few months. Since Tinubu came to power last May, an estimated 4,500 people have been kidnapped across the country. This is according to a consultancy based in Lagos in southern Nigeria. 4,500 kidnappings in the last 9 months on Tinubu's watch. It adds to his growing list of scandals. He's appointed his son-in-law to a high government post. His economic policies have caused the Naira to crash. The people have been suffering with rising inflation, and now kidnappings are rampant again. Amid all this chaos, Tinubu chooses to put his name on an airport. It shows his misplaced priorities and utter lack of tact. Our next story is about climate change. It's affecting everything, including fruits. The latest victim is the banana. Banana prices are on the rise. Experts say it's because of global warming. In February, a dozen bananas were selling for 80 rupees in India's Mumbai. In Bengaluru, a kilogram cost 100 rupees. Compare that to the average rate. It's around 20 to 30 rupees per kilo. So the prices are truly going bananas. And as the planet warms, it could become worse. Our next report tells you why the world's most popular fruit could be in danger.
In the annals of culinary history, few fruits hold as much sway as the humble banana. From its origins in the jungles of Southeast Asia to its global conquest as the world's most popular fruit, the banana has come a long way. It's enjoyed by millions of people across the globe. But will that journey end soon? If you're a minion, this could be disastrous news. Banana prices are going bananas, and scientists say climate change is to blame. Bananas primarily grow in tropical regions, which means it has specific temperature and humidity requirements. But climate change has disrupted that. Rising temperatures, altered rainfall patterns, and increased warm weather events have led to a decline in banana yields. Then there are pests and diseases. Once a plantation gets infected, it's very difficult to save. All banana plants are killed. And the rising temperatures are making it susceptible to more diseases, like Fusarium wilt TR4. It emerged in Australia, moved to Asia, and now is in South America. It's threatening the Cavendish banana, which is the world's favorite variety. All of this makes banana plantations vulnerable. Harvests are reducing and prices are going up. Take India, for example. Here, the average cost for a kilogram of bananas is 20 to 30 rupees. India is the largest producer of bananas in the world. It produces 33 million tons of bananas every year. But last month, prices saw a huge spike. In Mumbai, a dozen bananas were selling for 80 rupees. In Bengaluru, a kilogram was selling for 100 rupees. And it's not just India. In the United Kingdom, shops are experiencing shortages. Argentina is running low on the fruit. Russians have been told to grow their own bananas. Floods have devastated banana plantations in Australia. In Venezuela, a banana fungus is affecting plantations. So the humble fruit is under attack across the globe. So what's the solution? That was the topic of discussion at the World Banana Forum. Yes, that's a thing. The body met in Rome this week. They discussed the challenges affecting the fruit. Everything was on the table, from price hike to sustainability. The UN body is still to come up with a concrete solution. They're only discussing stopgap measures for now. But here's a sobering reminder. Climate change is affecting all aspects of our lives, from the way we live to the food we eat. And unless we address the root cause of global warming, your favorite fruit will remain under threat.
Now let's talk about a modern dilemma. Smartphones. Should children be using smartphones? How long should they be kept away from these devices? Should teens be on social media? What kind of content should they see? From policymakers to parents, adults everywhere are boggled. They think of mobile phones as a Pandora's box that can unleash all kinds of evil. But to most children, these metal blocks are flashy toys. By the age of 3, about 40% children are already using mobile phones the world over. And by the time children hit their teen years, most of them have smartphones. Soon these bricks go from being favorite toys to prized possessions, even an addiction. 50% of teens globally are addicted to mobile phones. And here's the thing with addiction. After a point, it can be sickening. And maybe that's what's happening in this case as well. A new survey is out and its findings will surprise you. It says that American teenagers are sick of their smartphones. Nearly 3/4 of them feel happy without their phones. That's 3 out of 4 teenagers. They say they're more at peace without their phones, at least theoretically. Because despite this feedback, they've not limited their phone usage. Only 36% American teens have cut back on using their devices. Most teens are still spending more than 8 hours a day on smartphones, 8 hours in a day. 45% teens are constantly on the internet. They say despite the downsides, phones help them tremendously. 69% say smartphones help them pursue hobbies. 65% say smartphones make them creative. 45% say phones help them do well in school. Plus, children need phones to contact their parents. They use phones to make payments, so smartphones have their upside, and teens see that. But the pros do not outweigh the cons. Mobile phones are fueling a mental health crisis across the world. 4 in 10 teens feel anxious and lonely without their smartphones. They're struggling with poor attention spans. 80% teens check their phones every hour. They get 237 or more notifications each day. Then there is social media and its harmful messaging. Online bullying, harassment and sexual exploitation. 46% adolescents say social media makes them feel worse about their body image. 64% are exposed to hate-based content. Did you know that children are even buying drugs on social media, or that child sex images are more widely available than ever before? There are 36 million pornographic images of children on social media, but whether teenagers see these downsides or not, the adults must. And in the past few months, it seems like they have been taking note. Last year, more than 40 states in the US sued Meta, 40 American states. The parent company of Instagram and Facebook, it was sued for contributing to the youth mental health crisis. This year, the CEOs of Meta, TikTok and other social media companies were grilled. They went before the American Senate and testified about harms to young people. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg was made to apologize yet again.
I'm sorry for everything that you all have been through. No one should have to go through the things that your families have suffered.
While this goes on, policymakers have been using harsher language. They've called Meta the world's, and I'm quoting, the world's single largest marketplace for pedophiles. They say children are trafficked on its platforms and that social media is a public health hazard. I'm quoting here, an environmental toxin. That's because it designs platforms with addictive features. Some US states, the UK, Canada and the EU have passed laws to reduce children's exposure to harmful content. Meanwhile, almost 1 in 4 countries have banned smartphones in schools. In India, we do not have a nationwide ban, but most state governments and schools ban smartphones. So steps are being taken across the board, albeit at a slow pace. Will teenagers boost this progress? The survey is encouraging, but we'll have to see if they walk the talk. Vantage continues after a short break.
Of date of December 2014. So what can these documents be? As far as the documentation to prove your nationality is concerned, passport from your original country, some kind of a birth certificate from your original country, or any government document from your country of origin, which is Bangladesh, Afghanistan or Pakistan, is acceptable. Now one might ask that if these are persecuted minorities, if they have fled from their country, how is it that they will have these documents? So one has to understand that this is a situation where we are talking of people who have been in India for the last 10 years, at least, because 2014, like I said, is the cutoff date. When they came to India, most of them came on long-term visa. For example, I spoke to some people who are in Rajasthan, who fled from Pakistan, but they came to India on the pilgrimage visa. Similar instances are found in Majnu Ka Tila area of Delhi as well. So these are people who took a 7-day visa or a 15-day visa saying that we want to do Kumbh Mela or we want to visit places of pilgrimage. So when they came and they got that visa, they had their passport and they had their visa stamped as well. There is no renewal for passport that these people required, because within 1 month of coming to India, as per existing norms, they had to go to the local FRRO, the Foreigners Registration Office, and say that I don't want to go back to my country because I fear persecution. Now, under the new rules, even that FRRO slip whereby you have communicated and FRRO has acknowledged your communication, even that is being accepted by Government of India. And because based on that FRRO slip, you were given a long-term visa. So the process of documentation is already there. Some people, because they've been in India for so long, have gotten their children admitted into schools. In the school admission form, their country of origin is mentioned as Pakistan, Bangladesh or Afghanistan. They've got their Aadhaar cards based on their long-term visa. Those Aadhaar cards have been linked to bank account, bank documents. All of these are acceptable documents now. So for this group which came to India before 2014, life will be much simpler, it will be much easier. But they hope and they feel that there are many in these colonies, refugee camps of Jaisalmer, refugee camps of Majnu Katila. The exodus from these countries continue. From these 3 countries, people have come in 2016, 20, 22, and people I spoke to, those who are benefiting from the new CAA rules, say that we will definitely pray that this day comes in the lives of our other brethren as well. But of course, Indian government will have to take a call. For now, people who came before 2014 December can avail of Indian citizenship under the new Citizenship Amendment Act rules. Citizenship Amendment Act rules have finally been framed and notified. This means that people from Pakistan, Afghanistan and Bangladesh who came to India before December 2014 and who want to now be called Indian citizens, they now know how to go about the process. There is a portal that is being notified by the Ministry of Home Affairs, which means the entire job application process will happen online. On this application form, they will have to swear allegiance to Indian Constitution, to India and its people. There are other formats also available. So with the application, they will have to specify where they came from, the country of origin, the religion that they follow. As far as documentation is required, the Schedule IA that has been mentioned, Schedule 1A, which has been mentioned as part of the Gazette notification, says that 2 sets of documents are required. One, to prove your nationality, and second, to prove that you came to India before the cutoff date of December 2014. So what can these documents be? As far as the documentation to prove your nationality is concerned, passport from your original country, some kind of a birth certificate from your original country, or any government document from your country of origin, which is Bangladesh, Afghanistan or Pakistan, is acceptable. Now one might ask...